The world of video games is a precarious one. Building a release is costly, time-consuming, and difficult. Hell, getting a game made at all, much like my hair, is a mini miracle in itself, and that's before it even sells well. Consider, if you will, myself and Jules as consoles. I'm a sleek and backwards compatible one, and he's a lumpy mess with Sega CD expansions plugged into him like life support machines. His machine probably won't sell as well as mine, that's what I'm saying.
However, you might have a case where, again using Josh and I as examples, might see my catalogue of games, much like my list content, being a true cavalcade of smash hits, and his lineups looking like, well, much like his career choices after this job, pretty bloody empty. Chalk one up to me.
What I think we're trying to say is that in this swift, cutthroat nature industry, sometimes companies are only one bad decision away from throwing away all the hard work they've delivered into a complete garbage fire. Committing to a bad idea that can either result in the entire studio going under, or at the very least reduced to a shell of their former glory. Either way, the results aren't pretty.
So let's take a look at the writing on the wall and then write those into notes for your consumption, as I'm Jules.
And I'm Josh.
And these are 8 terrible decisions that doomed popular video game companies. Number 8. Wasting a huge loan and nearly dooming a local economy. 38 studios. To say that Kingdoms of Amalur was a game with ambition is like saying that a burning building might affect the ice cream inside it. A massive understatement. We actually covered this story of this game's rise and fall in full on our gaming channel, but I'll give you the cliff notes of what went down here. It all began with a massive loan given by the Rhode Island Board of Economic Development to Kurt Schilling, an ex-pitcher for the Phillies, Red Sox, and the Diamondbacks. This $75 million loan was to help kickstart a video game industry within the state, and Kingdoms of Amalur was going to lead the charge. The problem was that the money was spent, but not spent well. Good choices like hiring acclaimed fantasy writers and setting up cross-promotion events were balanced by terrible decisions on company bonuses, PR events, and technical changes. It all led to a nasty situation where the game itself sold fairly well for a new IP, but it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. There was literally no way to recoup this $75 million, no matter how well the game sold. In fact, someone broke it down that for 38 studios to even come close to clawing back this money, it would need to release hit after hit without any mistakes or missteps for years to come. Not even current AAA publishers can maintain that sort of consistency. Talk about a bad investment on behalf of the Rhode Island Board of Economic Development, right?
Number 7. Sticking to a formula and not changing their engine. Telltale. The demise of Telltale is undeniably tragic, and it stings so much because pretty much everyone other than those inside the company saw the warning signs for years. After shooting to success with the first season of The Walking Dead, the studio quickly put another season into production alongside a whole host of other licensed adaptations. Quickly expanding their focus, they went from juggling a single project to multiple at the same time, which led to an immediate, if not drastic, decrease in quality across the board. It didn't help that their newfound success meant that they couldn't get away with the imperfections that their engine caused either, which resulted in games that crashed, employed wonky animations, and all around felt a little amateur when compared to even other indie games. This resulted in fans and critics alike becoming sick of having to wrestle with the games themselves in order to find the enjoyment. But there was a much more insidious problem that was driving the studio into the ground. According to a lengthy report on The Verge into the studio's final days, a bunch of former employees all pointed towards one reason for the closure: the fear from those in charge over taking any creative risks at all. Allegedly, Telltale's higher-ups demanded that every future game follow the same structure and formula of the original season of The Walking Dead, which led to all their releases feeling familiar and franchise fatigue setting in across the board.
Number 6. Trying to sue and then being sued. Silicon Knights. Too Human was a game that, on paper, sounded amazing. A game that could have ushered in a new techno-Norse trilogy which could have been as big as Mass Effect. Hell, it aimed to be even bigger than that. However, as with most games that try to gorge themselves on ideas and features and wash it down with lavish budgets, Too Human became a bloated mess which fans simply shrugged into obscurity. Actually, that last sentence is a little false, as the fans didn't make Too Human disappear, Epic Games did. After sales of their game didn't hit targets, Silicon Knights tried to sue Epic Games and their Unreal Engine, claiming that they didn't receive the proper support and issues with the tech led them to missing their launch date and releasing a still-to-be be polished title. This was their first mistake, as Epic Games took the matter further and investigations began on both sides. What they found was Silicon Knight's second and most terrible mistake, that they had decided to make games with the Unreal Engine, sue the makers of said engine, all without having a legitimate license. The court went in favour of Epic Games and Too Human was pulled from store shelves, production was cut, and it was effectively expunged from history, much like that videotape of me, your mum and that rubber truncheon, until Microsoft made the game free and backwards compatible, much like your mum as well, in 2013. And yes, that was my one per list.
Number 5, thinking peripherals were the future. Neversoft. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, Neversoft were the coolest developers around. From their sick, spike-through-the-eye logo to the games they created, the studio rode the cultural zeitgeist in a way others only dreamed of. It was the Tony Hawk series that was their bread and butter though, with the team overseeing the amazing Pro Skater titles into the edgier era of Underground and American Wasteland, which by the way were also very awesome. As skateboarding in general lost its cultural standing and franchise fatigue started to set in, Activision wrote the studio in to create Guitar Hero games instead. For the most part, the titles Neversoft produced were pretty decent, but their talents were arguably wasted as Activision simply tried to shift as many expensive plastic guitars as possible. In a 3-year period, the devs produced no less than 8 Guitar Hero related games, before Activision made the company defunct and shifted the employees over to Infinity Ward to work on Call of Duty. Ironically, peripheral-based games wouldn't only go on to kill Neversoft, but eventually tank their Tony Hawk's franchise as well under the control of another developer.
Number 4. Terrible marketing for the GIZMONDO, Tiger Telematics. Tiger Telematics might not be a name that conjures up any meaning in today's industry, but in all honesty, it should be held up as an example of how best to nosedive into concrete from great height. Not to be confused with Tiger Electronics, Telematics decided to create a video game handheld unit that would compete with Sony and Nintendo, and launched the GIZMONDO in 2005 here in the UK. It was a disaster, partly because the unit lacked many of the features it promised, but also because of how funds were used to advertise the console. In order to drum up interest, Tiger Telematics paid music artists like Pharrell Williams and Sting to appear in a custom-built launch store to celebrate the GIZMONDO's release. They also made a custom Ferrari that raced in the Le Mans 24, which also set back the company a ton of money. This wouldn't have mattered had the console sold well, but it didn't, and holds the record for the lowest-selling video game console of all time. On top of that, they were sued by pretty much everyone imaginable because of ludicrous contracts put in place. Only 8 games exist for this console, and one has to imagine how anyone thought this was a good idea.
Number 3, selling out to jump on Battle Royale. Boss Key Productions. Boss Key Productions was supposed to be the next big creative force in gaming. Headed up by former Epic veteran Cliff Bleszinski, the new team quickly got to work on their first blockbuster title, the hero shooter Lawbreakers. The multiplayer title set 2 teams against each other, the Law and the Breakers, across some genuinely well-designed maps and game modes. The actual gameplay, perhaps unsurprisingly as well considering the people behind it, was very solid, packing a real punch. Sadly, it sold poorly thanks in part to comparisons to Overwatch and Boss Key's own muddled messaging, and was a financial failure. Though it was criticised as being a lifeless, blatant copy of Blizzard's shooter, that description was actually quite reductive, and undermined the actual great concepts Lawbreakers really had. However, the same defence can't be used for the next game, the Battle Royale-themed Radical Heights. Jumping ship from Lawbreakers to chase the luxurious market of Battle Royale, the studio pushed out their take on the genre mere months into development, dubbing the release Extreme Early Access and completely tanking. As expected, everyone saw it as a blatant, cynical attempt to cash in on a booming idea, and the studio as a whole shut down a single month later.
Number 2. Huge overestimations of E.T'S selling power. Atari. Atari were once the giants of the gaming industry, throwing their weight around like bloody, sweaty knackers. It was like the Wild West for the developer, and with some smash hits under their belt, they procured a certain swagger. It's a shame then that because of their decisions and overestimation on the selling power of E.T. the video game, that they inadvertently caused the video game crash of 1983. Now, of course, there were other factors, but E.T. has become synonymous with the industry's failure, and it is not hard to see why. For a start, the game was a literal cash grab, with it being commissioned and rushed through production from July until September 1982, in time for the Christmas holidays. This meant that it skipped playtesting because of a crushed time schedule and was messy from start to finish. Worse still was Atari's decision to commission so many units that they would have needed to sell a copy to every single Atari 2600 owner, and then on top of this, an additional 1 million units to clear stock. That's insane. Anyone could have seen that this was a terrible decision, except of course for Atari, who went ahead, lost a ton of money, and tried to bury their shame in the New Mexico desert.
Number 1, trying to create a Halo killer, Free Radical. When you come at the king, you better not miss. No bigger words of warning could have been said to both developers Free Radical and publisher Ubisoft when they got to work on creating Haze, a first-person shooter which was pitched as being a so-called Halo killer pretty much since its first day of production. At the time, Bungie's franchise was still the biggest name in the FPS scene, though it would soon come to be succeeded by Call of Duty, and every developer was wanting to dethrone them and reap the rewards. If there was any studio that could potentially challenge their reign, it was Free Radical, who were pitched as gaming's best underdogs after delivering the stellar Time Splitters games. The problem was, while Free Radical did indeed have an ambitious title on their hands, Ubisoft were more concerned with telling journalists how it was absolutely, definitely, for sure, going to make Halo look like a little baby, rather than, solving the problems the studio was bringing up during development. As a result, the game shipped as a complete mess, taking extra flack because it was giving it the big bollocks and contributing heavily to Free Radical going under a little while later.
And there we go, those were 8 terrible decisions that doomed popular video game companies. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please share any more stories that you've got about this or anything else down in the comments section below, because who knows, we may revisit this subject, because you know what? Misery loves company, and it was great to see all these people fail. Oh, obviously I don't mean that if it cost anyone their jobs and they had a sad time about it. In fact, that's not true at all.
Just wrap it up.
Sorry, yeah. You can go follow me at RetroJ over on Twitter if you'd like to, and you can follow Josh at, I believe it's Josh Broom with 2 O's.
Yes, that's it.
Hope you enjoyed this, guys, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.